Welcome to the Leadership Buzz with Lloyd Buzz Buzzle, an International Coaching Federation credentialed coach, DISC practitioner, and retired Air Force officer with 37 years of leadership experience. This podcast is for leaders who want to align behavior with values and grow in self-awareness, and each episode features one book, one idea, one story, and 3 coaching questions to help you reflect on your leadership. Work hard. Tell the truth. Here's Buzz. Let's roll.
Hey, before we jump in today, I want to just say thank you to everyone who's reached out and shared feedback on the podcast. I've gotten some really helpful input from listeners, and I'm working on to keep improving these episodes and make them more useful for you. I want to share a couple things for our listeners. Pat in South Carolina mentioned, I'm enjoying it. I'm identifying with it. I wish I could go back and share it with old bosses. Well, I had another input from a listener that talked about the length of it that was just right to be able to digest that during a time of the day. So I appreciate that feedback and some other feedback I've done to adjust some of the production and some of the organization of the podcast. So that's the goal, bringing you ideas that help you lead better. I appreciate you being part of this. I look forward to continuing to grow. TJ, give us some insight on the book that we're working on today.
Today's book is Radical Candor by Kim Scott. The key concept we will focus on today from her book is giving, receiving, and encouraging guidance, and creating a culture of open communication. Strong teams are built on honest feedback, trust, and the willingness to say what needs to be said while still showing people they matter. Leadership is not about avoiding hard conversations. It is about caring enough to have them. Over to you, Coach Buzz.
Thanks. Today we're going to talk about something that sounds really simple, but is one of the hardest things to do as a leader, and that's really telling the truth to people you care about. This comes from the book Radical Candor by Kim Scott, and the idea is straightforward but not always easy. Great leaders don't choose between being kind and being direct. They do both. They care personally and they challenge directly. And when you put these two together, that's where the real leadership happens. Let me start here. Leadership is personal. It's not just business. I know we say that sometimes. It's just business, but it's not. You're working with people, actual real people, people with families, goals, pressures, kids, insecurities, strengths, and things that are going on in their lives that maybe you don't fully ever understand. And if you're going to lead well, you have to bring your whole self to that. And you have to care about the people who work for you as human beings. Not just what they're producing, not just their output, and not just whether they hit the numbers. You have to care about them. And that's what care personally means and what Kim Scott brings in her book. Now, here's where a lot of readers get this wrong. We've been told our whole career to be professional. And a lot of times that really means leave your humanity at the door. Don't get too close. Don't make it personal. Don't bring your whole self. But if you want to build strong relationships, you have to do the opposite. You have to care personally. You have to understand what motivates your people and what they care about. What's really motivating them and driving them every day when they come into work. And it's very surprising sometimes if you don't know that. I'll tell you this from experience. It is not just time off or money. Those things definitely matter for sure. You know, having some quality time off with your family or friends or significant others is important. And making more money, of course, is more important. But they're usually not the primary motivators for most people. What most people really want to see is to be seen. They want to be valued. They want to feel like they matter, and they feel like they're growing, to know where they stand. And that's what was so incredible about being in the military. You had that mission. You had that sense of purpose every day when you got up for work. And really, it just drove myself in the Air Force. And I didn't find that or see that elsewhere in life.
Buzz, are leaders giving clarity or just keeping things comfortable?
That last one that I mentioned matters more than most leaders realize. People want clarity. Even when the truth is hard, they want clarity. And that's where leadership gets uncomfortable. Because once you care about the people, you have a responsibility to tell them the truth. And if you focus on the feedback, this candor, radical candor, is to improve other people that you care about, then that's going to change things for you. It's a game changer. If their work isn't good enough, you say it. If they're not ready for that next role they want, you say it. If they didn't meet the standard, you tell them. If you're going to bring someone in above them, you also tell them that. You don't hide it. You don't avoid it. You don't soften it so much that it loses meaning. I had a leader once say, hey, if somebody has to ask about things, they probably already know. They just are not saying it out loud. I don't tend to believe that. I think there's a lot of blind spots that we have as workers and leaders and followers, and that's important. So to be clear, do it clearly, to do it respectively and directly is very, very important. And this is where most leaders struggle because we've been taught to say something from a very early age. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And then you become a leader, and your job is to say things that are not always nice. And so there's some tension there. That's a tension piece. And most people default one way or the other. Kim Scott lays this out in her book in a simple framework. Those two dimensions, care personally and challenge directly. And when you combine these, you get 4 types of leadership behavior. First is this ruinous empathy. You care, but you don't challenge. You're really nice, you're supportive, but you don't say the hard things. And it feels good in the moment, but you avoid conflict. You want to keep the peace, but over time that's going to hurt people because they don't grow and they don't improve. They don't get that cleared feedback, and eventually the gap shows up in performance, both individually and on the team. The second piece she talks about is obnoxious aggression. You challenge, but you don't care. You're so blunt, you're direct, and some people take a lot of pride in this. They think, oh, I'm blunt and direct. That's just how I am. Maybe you're just a jerk about it. Maybe almost bordering on toxic. You tell people exactly what you think, but there's no relationship and no trust. You're not telling people something to improve. You're just being mean-spirited about it. And that's where people shut down. They stop listening. They disengage. And they end up talking behind your back and telling those stories. The third kind is manipulative insincerity. There is really no care and no challenge. You say one thing to someone's face and someone else behind their back. That's where trust breaks down completely. And once trust is gone, it's hard to get that back. And then finally, it's radical candor. Right in the middle, care personally, challenge directly at the same time. And here's the part I really want you to hear. Challenging people is one of the clearest ways that you show you care. And Kim Scott reinforces that in the book Radical Candor. If you truly care about someone, you don't let them stay where they are. You don't let them fall short without feedback. You don't let them operate below their potential. I know I had a situation once where I had a really good, hard piece of feedback to give my boss. And I went to somebody and I said, hey, I'm not sure if I should give this feedback to my boss. I'm not sure what's going to happen. And he asked me 2 questions. The first question, he said, hey, do you care about the team? Do you care about the unit and the squadron? Of course I do. And do you care about your boss? Yes, I do. Well, if you answer the question like that, if you care, then you're going to care enough to be able to give that feedback and what the issue is. You step in and you tell them the truth and you help them get better. I did it that day, and it was hard and it was tough, but I got through it.
Coach Buzz, can you give another example of this from your career?
There was a time when I had someone on my team who was a strong performer, but they started to slip. Nothing dramatic, but I could see it. Maybe a piece of complacency there. The attention to detail wasn't there. We didn't have the consistency. And I knew it, and I felt like if I didn't say it, it was just that complacency and that slipping was going to get worse. I kind of remember thinking, I don't want to come down too hard, and I don't want to discourage them, and I want to create that tension. That's ruinous empathy. That's me caring but not challenging. So I had a decision. Do I stay quiet and hope it fixes itself, or do I step in and say what needs to be said? So I did step in that situation, and I had that conversation. Not harsh, not aggressive, but clear. I told them what I was seeing. I told them where I thought the gap was and what I believed they could do better. And really what happened was they stepped up because they knew they cared, and they knew I was being honest about it and not just mean-spirited or being a jerk. That's the power of that radical candor. You have to build that. Now, when you combine care and challenge consistently, something powerful happens and trust builds. And when trust builds, people believe you, they accept that criticism, listen, they engage with you, and believe it or not, they end up telling you what they really think. And that's really important, but you have to build that. Now, you just don't have communication, you have alignment in that sense. And when you get aligned, you get a much more cohesive team. People start working together, they support each other, there's challenge, there's accountability. And that's where the results really improve on the team, because one person is not just driving it by themselves, it's because the team is aligned. And that's how you achieve real results, through collaboration.
Can you tell us where you have seen this?
I've seen this over and over again in the military. The best teams I've been a part of, they weren't the smartest, they weren't the most talented. They were the teams where people trusted each other enough to tell the truth, where feedback wasn't avoided, where conversations were real and people knew, I'm going to be challenged, but I'm also going to be supported. I had an inspection coming up once, and the team produced a patch. It was maybe a silly thing, but they put a patch together because they were doing so much work to represent that work and that they were a team together. When they showed me that patch, at that moment, I knew we were going to pass the inspection because the team had really gelled together and created a sense of purpose around what they needed to get done. I was pretty proud of the team that day, and we did pretty spectacular during the inspection. Because when you get there too, it just changes everything. Now let's bring this back to you. I want you to think about your team or who you work with and your leadership, the conversations you have, and are there things you're not saying to someone that you need to? And are there conversations that are being avoided, or are there just people you're protecting instead of developing? Because when you avoid the truth, you don't protect people, you limit them. And when you tell them the truth in the right way, in the right trustful way, you create clarity, you create growth, and you create that trust. And trust is really the foundation of everything. Everything's built on relationships, and all relationships are built on trust. Leadership isn't just about being comfortable, it's about that responsibility. Responsible for your people, growth, for their growth, and for the culture you create on your team. And culture isn't built in big initiatives. It's in small moments. I would say conversations, interactions, decisions, one conversation at a time each day. That radical candor is not about being harsh. It's not about saying whatever you want. It's not about using honesty as an excuse to be careless or toxic. It's about being intentional, thoughtful, clear, and human. Care personally, challenge directly. That's how you build trust. That's how you develop people, and that's how you lead. Hey, thanks for listening. If this helped you, share it with someone else who's also leading. And really just take a few minutes this week to say what needs to be said to a fellow teammate, to a leader, to a peer, or somewhere where you think it needs to be said.
Buzz, any final thoughts for this week?
As we wrap up, here's the bottom line on feedback. People want clarity. They want to know where they stand, even when it's hard to hear. This is pretty simple. And this radical candor is about caring enough to give that clarity, not avoiding the conversation, not softening it to the point where it loses meaning, but saying it in a way that's honest and respectful. When you care about people, you build trust. When you challenge directly, you help people grow. And when they come together, feedback actually works. It's not about being harsh. It's about being clear, consistent, and human. If you want to lead well, don't hold back what needs to be said. Say it in a way that helps people move forward, because the focus should be on improving and building the team and building trust on your team. The best feedback isn't the easiest to give. It's the one that helps someone grow.
Coach Buzz, can you give us this week's 3 coaching questions for our listeners?
For this week's 3 coaching questions, let's start with describe what building trust on your team truly means to you as a leader, and what you believe people need from you to feel that trust. How does that look to you, and how do you feel about that when you discuss it? 2, tell me how caring personally and challenging directly show up in your leadership. What does that look like in your conversations, your decisions, and how others experience you day to day And you give thought to that. And how does that look or feel when you talk about it? Finally, tell me about a time when you leaned into both care and challenge, or avoiding one of them. What happened and what impact did that have on trust and results?
Today we discussed Radical Candor by Kim Scott. Giving, receiving, and encouraging guidance are important parts of strong leadership and healthy teams. Open communication and honest feedback help people grow, build trust, and create better cultures. In Scott's words, radical candor is what happens when leaders put care personally and challenge directly together. This enables leaders to create a culture of compassionate candor, build more cohesive teams, and achieve results collaboratively. Back to you, Buzz.
Thanks for listening to the Leadership Buzz. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe so you don't miss future conversations. And if you have a moment, leave a rating or review. That helps other leaders discover the show. If these kinds of leadership questions resonate with you and you'd like to explore them more deeply, feel free to reach out to me. Coaching conversations often start exactly this way. Until next time, work hard, tell the truth.